I was on the faculty. I was on the faculty at the University of Arizona, and I was teaching soils and water management. And the State Department came and asked me to go back into the federal government. And so I accepted a job to go to India. The first job that I had after when I went back to the State Department was in India. And at that time, India was importing 70 million tons of rice in order to feed themselves. And the idea was to figure out how they could handle either the rice or the water. So in India, I decided the water problem was the chief problem. The United States had loaned India $31 billion for construction of irrigation projects. And as far as I know, India had never paid back a dime of that. But India did have a lot of rice under irrigation, and they had an agency similar to our Bureau of Reclamation that they called the Public Works Department, and they were in charge of the irrigation in India. And all they did was take the water out to each village and just say, here's your water, come and get it. And the local village people are supposed to build the project and take it away and then irrigate each field. And it was a pretty wasteful way of handling water, because they had a lot of alkali established there already, and they had a lot of land that had been ruined, and they had a lot of misuse of water and unreasonably high use of water in relation to what they're getting out of it. And so I worked with the government of India, and I decided that what we'd have to do would be to transfer the management of water to the Department of Agriculture, and then train the agricultural boys how to manage it. Instead of having water rights system, we'd have a system whereby we determine how much water was needed for a given farm or a given field, and allot the farmer that amount of water. In other words, it wasn't a water right, it was the right in which we decided how much water was needed, and the technicians I was training while I was in India would be able to determine how much water was needed for each field. And the big problem was that they're using too much water for the rice. They're trying to grow rice like we grow it in the United States. You know that we're growing rice all through California and every place we're growing rice in the United States. We're using more water than we need to grow rice. We're using it first for weed control and second for insect control and disease control and all. And the deeper the water, the deep water is used for that purpose. They only need 3 inches of water to grow rice. But if you're going to grow rice on a field with only 3 inches of water, it's pretty obvious you got to have the field level. And India had all these fields with uneven surfaces, and so the 11 inches of water provided maybe an inch of water over part of it, and 7 inches over part of it, and 11 inches over part of it. And the trick was to get every field level. So I started a program to level every field in India that they planned to grow rice on, set it up so that the agricultural, they got the water management transferred to the Department of Agriculture instead of the Department of Public Works. The Department of Public Works corresponded with our Interior Department. Now I was doing something in India and recommending something in India. would never be able to accomplish in the United States. The idea that the agricultural department should determine the amount of water you allotted for a farm wouldn't be acceptable in this country. They have a water rights system here, and everybody that has a right to a certain amount of water expects to get that amount of water, and the custom is to have an average of about 11 inches of water if they're going to grow rice. And actually, in fact, when I came back from all of this experience in Asia, I offered to show the farmers in the Delta how to grow more rice with a sprinkler system than they were growing with their 11 inches of water that they were using. And of course, they weren't interested in even having an experiment of that kind, because this is a system of using water as an established policy in California, and we're not supposed to tamper with that. But in India, I was able to get away with it because I was advising. I was sent over there as an advisor to figure out how to change the management of water in India. I was a water management instructor at the University of Arizona and a soils man, and my job was to try to help the Indian government set up a system whereby they would produce enough to feed themselves, because they were importing, when I went there, 70 million tons of rice. And you know very well that they're not only feeding themselves now, you can go down to Costco and buy Indian rice. And so they've succeeded in what I taught them in 1964. And so they've done a good job with it. But what we did was say that every field in India has to be perfectly level. Well, everybody thinks, well, that's a big engineering job. But the truth is, the only person, we used a water level. You ever heard of a water level? It's a 50-foot, we use a 50-foot sheet of plastic tubing, fill it with water, and we had to fill it with water and put food coloring in it, because if we used any kind of dye, the kids would eat it and kill themselves. So, kids would drink the water out of one of those tubes and kill themselves. So we used nothing but food coloring so that we could see the level of the water in that tube. And we put what would be equivalent to a yardstick on each end of that and turned it up and filled it with water with the food coloring in it, and it would show the level of the water at any place you want to take the other end of that 50-foot of plastic tubing. Use 3/4 inch plastic tubing, and we moved that around over the field, and that told you where you had to make the cuts and the fills. Now, the only fellow that could operate that water level successfully was the guy that had been irrigating it. And the reason is that he was the only fellow that would know where the average depth of water was in that field when he had irrigation water on it. And he would set his water level down at that point, then he'd move it around and see where to make the cuts and the fills in that field. And he'd just go from one field to the other and from one area to the other, and eventually he would provide the engineering necessary. Now, to do the work, at one time we had 20 million Indians leveling land all at the same time before I left. They continued the program after I was gone for years. But nevertheless, while I was there, they had 20 million Indians leveling land. Now, part of it was by hand, part of it was with bullock scrapers, part of it with horse scrapers, and part of it was just furrow the ground out and then scoop it out somewhere or other. The idea was that you had to have the field level when you got through. And when you had the field level, then you could add only 3 inches of water and grow a rice crop. So that's what I contributed to India, was a method of getting land level enough, and then adopting a policy of only using 3 inches of water to grow rice. And it was very successful. The very first fields that we put into production that way produced just as much or more rice than ever had before, but only produced 3 inches of water instead of 11 inches. And you see, with that extra water, they could go irrigate several more fields. But it took several years for that to really work itself out. So I just got it started, all I'd ever accomplished there. But I did have, at one time, I estimated we had 20 million Indians working to level the land in various parts of India, working to level the land so it would only take 3 inches of water to grow a rice crop. And when I got home, I tried to get the people in the Delta, or the ag people in the Delta, to even experiment with the sprinkler system to see if they could grow more rice with a sprinkler system than they could with 11 inches of water they were using. And of course, that isn't any change in agriculture or the water rights system in California wouldn't be acceptable. So I don't expect to accomplish anything in this state. But that's what happened in India. And then when I got to South Vietnam, the problem there was to change the variety. And that's what we accomplished there. We brought them a variety that would increase production, and it was adapted to the tropics. And India has lots of different climates for rice, and they had a lot of varieties. And by only using 3 inches of water, they're able to go ahead and get some of they have their own experiment stations and everything. And they're able to adapt that. And now India is exporting a little rice. You can see it over at Costco. You can go over to Costco and you can buy the finest quality Indian rice. You can buy Vietnamese rice over there too. And that's, I hate to say it, but that's a lot of that was resulted from the work that I was able to do with the State Department while I was working in India and then in South Vietnam. And that was way back in 1964 to 66. And from 66 on, I was out of that part of the program and was working with the CIA in South Vietnam from 66 to 72.